Every mortgage payment, every carefully planned renovation, every security system upgrade. All of it designed to protect what mattered most. His wife, Shelley Patterson McCarty, sat across from him at the breakfast table, her auburn hair catching the morning light as she scrolled through her phone with practiced indifference. "Tommy, finish your cereal," she said without looking up, her voice carrying that particular tone of maternal exhaustion that had become her default over the past year. Their 9-year-old son pushed his spoon around the bowl, his dark eyes, so much like Harry's own, focused on something beyond the kitchen window. The boy had been quieter lately, more withdrawn. Harry had noticed, though Shelley seemed oblivious to anything that didn't involve her phone or her increasingly frequent girls' nights out. "Dad, can we practice baseball this weekend?" Tommy asked, his voice small but hopeful. Harry set down his coffee cup, studying his son's face. "Of course, buddy. We'll work on your swing." Shelley's laugh was sharp, cutting. "He's not going to make the team anyway. Maybe we should focus on something more realistic." The words hit like a physical blow, and Harry watched his son's face crumble slightly before the boy learned to hide it, a skill no 9-year-old should need to master. Harry's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. "Tommy's got natural talent. He just needs practice and confidence. Whatever helps you sleep at night," Shelley muttered, still absorbed in her phone. Harry memorized that moment. The casual cruelty, the way she dismissed their son's dreams without even looking at him. He'd been collecting these moments for months now, storing them away like evidence in a case file. His wife had become a stranger, but strangers could be studied, understood, and ultimately predicted. The doorbell rang, and Shelley finally looked up, her face brightening in a way Harry hadn't seen directed at him in over a year. "Oh, that's probably Drew. He's helping me with the community fundraiser planning." Drew Davies. Harry knew the name well by now. 38, divorced, worked in pharmaceutical sales. Drove a red Mustang convertible that he probably thought made him look younger than his receding hairline suggested. Most importantly, Drew Davies had been in Harry's wife's contact list under the name gym trainer for the past 6 months, despite the fact that Shelley had never shown interest in fitness. "I'll get it," Harry said, rising from his chair. Drew stood on the porch wearing his trademark smirk and a polo shirt that strained slightly across his soft middle. "Harry, good to see you, man. Ready to help raise some serious money for the community center?" The handshake was firm, practiced. Drew's eyes held that particular brand of arrogance that came from men who thought they were cleverer than everyone around them. Harry had interrogated terrorists with more subtlety. "Absolutely. Community service is important." Harry stepped aside, watching Drew's micro-expressions as Shelley appeared in the hallway. The way Drew's pupils dilated slightly when he saw her. The way Shelley's breathing changed, became more shallow. The unconscious step she took toward him before catching herself. "Amateur hour. Should we set up in the home office?" Shelley asked, her voice artificially bright. "Perfect," Drew replied, his eyes lingering on her in a way that would have been inappropriate if this were actually about fundraising. Harry watched them disappear upstairs, noting the time, 9:47 a.m. He'd give them 20 minutes before making an excuse to check on their progress, just long enough for them to get comfortable to lower their guard. Tommy finished his cereal and looked up at his father. "Dad, why doesn't Mom like me anymore?" The question hit Harry like a sniper's bullet. Unexpected, precise, devastating. He knelt beside his son's chair, seeing too much understanding in those young eyes. "Your mother loves you, Tommy. She's just going through a difficult time. Is it because I'm not good at things?" Harry's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained gentle. "You're good at things. You're smart, kind, and braver than you know. Don't ever let anyone tell you different." The sound of Shelley's laughter drifted down from upstairs, light and carefree in a way Harry hadn't heard in their own bedroom for months. He made another mental note. She could still laugh. She could still be happy. Just not with him or their son. "Go get ready for school, buddy. I'll drive you today." As Tommy ran upstairs, Harry remained in the kitchen, listening to the muffled voices above. 20 years of intelligence work had taught him patience, but it had also taught him when patience became complicity. His marriage was ending, had been ending for months, but he wouldn't let it end on their terms. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't called in 3 years. Felix Atkinson, former Special Forces, now running a private investigation firm. Some skills, once learned, never left you. And some debts, once owed, never expired. The phone rang twice before Felix's gravelly voice answered. Harry McCarty. I was wondering when you'd call. I need a favor, Felix. A quiet one. Personal or professional? Harry looked up at the ceiling, where his wife's voice mixed with another man's in what they thought was private conversation. Both. Chapter 2. Family Gatherings. The Patterson family home loomed like a Gothic monument to old money and older grudges. Every Sunday dinner at Lester and Hilda Patterson's estate felt like entering enemy territory, though Harry had only recently begun to understand just how accurate that assessment was. Tommy, wipe your feet, Hilda Patterson commanded before the boy had even stepped fully inside. At 68, Shelley's mother possessed the kind of sharp-edged authority that could slice through steel. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her pale blue eyes missed nothing, except, apparently, her own daughter's moral failings. Yes, ma'am, Tommy mumbled, carefully cleaning his sneakers on the mat. Lester Patterson emerged from his study, a bear of a man at 71, with hands that still bore the calluses of his construction empire. He'd built half of Richmond's commercial district, and he carried that accomplishment like a crown. Harry boy, how's business? Steady. Can't complain. Harry shook his father-in-law's hand, noting the man's grip was still strong enough to crush bone. Lester Patterson had never liked him, a nobody from nowhere who'd married above his station, in the old man's view. Good. Shelley's in the kitchen with her sister-in-law, getting dinner ready. The Patterson family had a way of making everything sound like a military operation. Dinner would be served at precisely 6 o'clock. Drinks would be offered at 5:30. Conversation would follow approved topics: business, weather, community affairs. Personal problems were to be kept personal. Tommy disappeared into the backyard where his cousin Krista was playing. At 11, Krista Patterson was 2 years older than Tommy and possessed her grandmother's sharp tongue without any of the accompanying wisdom. She was the daughter of Shelley's brother Brian Patterson, who died in a car accident 3 years ago, leaving Krista to be raised by her grandparents. Harry followed the sound of voices to the kitchen, where Shelley was laughing at something her sister-in-law Diana Patterson was saying. Diana had married into the family shortly before Brian's death, and her loyalty to the Patterson name was absolute, perhaps because she had the most to lose if she fell from grace. Harry, Diana greeted him with the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. How are you holding up with all of Shelley's community work? She's so dedicated. She certainly is. Harry watched his wife, noting how she avoided his gaze. The fundraiser seems to be taking up a lot of her time. Well, when you're working with someone as committed as Drew Davies, things tend to move quickly, Diana replied, and Harry caught the slight emphasis on Davies' name. So they knew, or suspected. The Patterson family protected their own, which meant they'd already decided whose side they were on. Drew's been very helpful, Shelley said, finally looking at Harry. There was something in her expression, defiance mixed with guilt, like a teenager caught sneaking out. Dinner proceeded with military precision. Lester held court at the head of the table, discussing a new development project with the kind of enthusiasm most men reserve for sports or women. Hilda managed the conversation like a conductor, ensuring everyone spoke their assigned parts at the proper moments. Tommy sat quietly, picking at his food until Krista decided to entertain herself. Tommy's team lost again yesterday, she announced with malicious glee. Coach says he might not make the cut for next season. Krista, Diana warned half-heartedly. It's true, right, Tommy? You struck out 3 times. Harry watched his son's face redden, saw the boy's hands clench on his fork. Practice makes perfect, Harry said calmly. Tommy's improving every game. Improvement requires natural ability, Lester said, not looking up from his roast beef. Can't make a racehorse out of a mule. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Harry felt something cold and dangerous unfurling in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral. 20 years of military training had taught him to separate emotion from tactical thinking. Speaking of natural ability, Hilda said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, Krista's been accepted into the advanced mathematics program. Youngest student they've ever admitted. That's wonderful, Harry replied, meaning it. He'd never wished harm on Krista herself. She was just a child, after all. But he was beginning to understand the ecosystem that had shaped her cruelty. After dinner, the adults moved to the living room while the children were banished to the backyard. Through the window, Harry could see Tommy and Krista near the garden shed, their voices rising in what looked like an argument. Tommy's having trouble in school, Shelley said suddenly, apropos of nothing. His teacher thinks he might need special help. This was news to Harry, and the way she delivered it, as a casual aside during family dinner, felt like a calculated insult. What kind of trouble? He asked. Focus issues, behavioral problems, the usual. Shelley's tone suggested this was somehow Harry's fault. Children reflect their home environment. Hilda observed with surgical precision. Stability is crucial during the formative years. Harry was parsing the subtext when a child's scream cut through the evening air. He was on his feet and moving before his brain fully processed the sound, reaching the backyard in seconds. Tommy was on the ground beside the garden shed, clutching his leg and sobbing. Krista stood over him, her face flushed with excitement rather than concern. What happened? Harry demanded, dropping to his knees beside his son. You pushed me first, Krista said quickly. I was just defending myself. Tommy's leg was scraped and bleeding where he'd fallen against the concrete garden border. Not serious, but painful for a 9-year-old. Tommy pushed you? Harry looked at his son, who was too hurt and scared to speak clearly. She said. Tommy gasped between sobs. By then, the rest of the family had arrived. Lester Patterson took one look at the scene and his face darkened. What did you do, boy? The accusation in his voice was clear. Tommy was guilty until proven innocent. If proving innocence were even possible in this family. Krista, tell us what happened, Hilda said gently, kneeling beside her granddaughter. Tommy got mad because I told him the truth about why his mom doesn't love him anymore, Krista said with the kind of innocent cruelty that only children could master. He tried to push me, so I pushed back. I didn't mean for him to fall. Harry's blood turned to ice. What truth? Krista looked around at the adults, sensing she'd crossed a line but not understanding where it was. About her boyfriend. About how they're going to send Tommy away when they get married. The silence that followed was deafening. Harry looked at Shelley, whose face had gone pale. Diana and Hilda exchanged glances. Lester's expression was unreadable. Krista, go inside, Diana said quickly. Now. But the damage was done. Harry helped Tommy to his feet, noting how his son tried to stop crying, tried to be brave in front of family that had never shown him kindness. We should go, Harry said quietly. Harry, Shelley started. We should go, he repeated, and something in his voice made her stop talking. As they walked to the car, Tommy leaning against his father's side, Harry felt the last pieces of his old life clicking into place. He'd been preparing for this moment for months without fully realizing it. Now the preparation phase was over. It was time to go to war. Chapter 3. The Truth Unveiled. Felix Atkinson's report arrived exactly 72 hours after their Sunday dinner disaster, delivered by encrypted email to Harry's secure account. Professional-grade surveillance, backed by financial records and testimony from sources Felix had cultivated over 2 decades in private investigation. Harry read it in his home office while Shelley was at another fundraiser meeting and Tommy was at school. The clinical language couldn't disguise the devastation. 6 months of hotels, restaurants, and gifts charged to credit cards Harry hadn't known existed. Text messages recovered from cloud backups. Photos taken with telephoto lenses. His wife and Drew Davies weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future. A condo lease in Drew's name, with Shelley listed as an authorized resident. Consultation with a divorce attorney known for aggressive asset protection strategies. Most damning of all, recorded conversations where they discussed Tommy as a complication that would need to be managed. Harry printed everything, organized it in 3 manila folders, and locked them in his desk drawer. 20 years of intelligence work had taught him that information was ammunition, but timing determined victory or defeat. The house felt different when Shelley returned that evening, as if Harry's knowledge had somehow altered the molecular structure of the air between them. She moved through their shared spaces like an actress playing a role she'd grown tired of performing. "How was the meeting?" Harry asked from the kitchen, where he was helping Tommy with homework. "Productive. We're making real progress on the fundraising goals." The lie came so easily that Harry wondered how many others he'd missed over the years. Tommy looked up from his math worksheet. "Mom, can you help me with this problem?" "Ask your father. He's the one who's good with problems." Another small cruelty delivered with surgical precision. Harry watched his son's face fall, then recover with the kind of resilience that no child should need to develop. "Let's look at it together, buddy." Later, after Tommy was in bed, Harry found Shelley in their bedroom, scrolling through her phone with that particular intensity that meant she was texting someone who wasn't him. "We need to talk," he said. She didn't look up. "About what?" "About Drew Davies." The phone slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor. When she looked at him, Harry saw fear flicker across her face before being replaced by defiance. "I don't know what you think you know. I know everything, Shelley. The hotels, the credit cards, the condo lease, the divorce attorney. I know you've been planning this for months." She stood slowly, and Harry was reminded of how beautiful she'd been when they first met. 15 years of marriage, and he could still see traces of the woman he'd fallen in love with beneath the stranger she'd become. "You had me followed. I had you investigated. There's a difference. How dare you? How dare I?" Harry's voice remained calm, but something in his tone made her step back. "How dare I try to understand why my wife had become a stranger? Why my son was being treated like an unwanted burden in his own home?" "Tommy isn't," she stopped herself, but Harry heard the words she hadn't said. "Isn't what? Isn't your son? Isn't worth your time? Isn't part of your new life with Drew?" Shelley's composure cracked, and for a moment he saw the woman he'd married, uncertain, defensive, but still recognizably human. "You don't understand what it's like," she said quietly. "Being married to someone who's never really here, even when he's standing right next to you. You're like a ghost, Harry. You see everything, you know everything, but you never feel anything. I feel plenty. I just don't perform my emotions for an audience. Drew makes me feel alive. Drew makes you feel young. There's a difference." She turned away, walking to the window that overlooked their backyard where Tommy's baseball glove lay forgotten on the patio table. "I want a divorce." "I know. I want joint custody." "No." The word hung between them like a blade. Shelley turned back, her eyes flashing with anger. "You can't prevent me from seeing my son. I can prevent you from damaging him further. And I will. Harry, be reasonable. I've been reasonable for months. I watched you check out of this family piece by piece. I've watched you treat our son like he's some kind of burden you can't wait to shed. I've been reasonable while you planned a future that didn't include the two people who needed you most." Harry moved to his dresser, pulling out a small recording device that had been hidden in his pocket during their Sunday dinner. "I've also been thorough." He pressed play, and Krista's young voice filled the room, about her boyfriend, about how they're going to send Tommy away when they get married. Shelley's face went white. "That's not." She misunderstood. "Did she?" "Because I have recordings of you and Drew discussing exactly that scenario. Boarding school, maybe, or letting Tommy live with my sister in Colorado. Anything to get him out of the way of your fresh start. You're sick. Recording your own family. I'm thorough. And right now, thorough is the only thing standing between Tommy and a childhood of being shuffled between homes like unwanted luggage." Shelley sat heavily on the edge of the bed, her bravado finally collapsing. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something very clearly," Harry said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that had once made enemy combatants confess their deepest secrets. "You can have your divorce. You can have your new life with Drew. But you will not take my son, and you will not damage him any further than you already have. He's my son, too. Is he? When's the last time you asked him about school? About his friends? About his dreams? When's the last time you tucked him in without checking your phone first?" She had no answer, and they both knew it. "Here's what's going to happen," Harry continued. "You're going to file for divorce. You're going to agree to my custody terms. And you're going to do it quietly, without drama, because if you don't—" He paused, letting the implications settle. "Well, let's just say that Felix Atkinson has contacts in the family court system, and judges tend to frown on mothers who abandon their children for affair partners." "You bastard." "Yes, but I'm a bastard who puts his son first. Can you say the same?" Shelley left that night, taking only a suitcase and her phone. Harry watched from the kitchen window as she loaded her car, then drove away into the darkness that had been calling to her for months. Upstairs, Tommy slept peacefully, unaware that his family had just imploded with surgical precision. Tomorrow, Harry would begin the process of rebuilding their life, just the two of them. But tonight, he allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The first phase was complete. Shelley was out of the house, out of their daily life, and soon to be out of their legal entanglements. But the other players in this drama, the Patterson family who had enabled her betrayal and Drew Davies who had encouraged it, they were still on the board. Harry had learned patience in the military, but he'd also learned that some enemies required more creative solutions than others. The Patterson family thought they understood him, thought he was just another son-in-law they could dismiss and discard. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Chapter 4. Breaking Point. 3 weeks after Shelley moved out, Harry stood in the kitchen making Tommy's lunch when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Hilda Patterson's number, and Harry briefly considered letting it go to voicemail. But intelligence gathering was a full-time job, even when it involved your soon-to-be former in-laws. "Harry, we need to talk." Hilda's voice carried its usual imperious tone, as if summoning a subordinate. "About what?" "About this ridiculous custody arrangement you're forcing on Shelley. The child needs his mother." Harry carefully placed a sandwich in Tommy's lunchbox, taking time to consider his response. Tommy has a father who's been present every day of his life. He'll be fine. Don't be selfish, Harry. This is about what's best for the boy. The irony was breathtaking. "I agree completely, which is why I'm ensuring he has stability and consistency. We're having Sunday dinner this week, and we expect Tommy to be there. Shelley will be joining us. Tommy has baseball practice on Sundays now. Cancel it." "No." The silence stretched long enough for Harry to hear Hilda's sharp intake of breath. In her world, people didn't say no to Patterson family commands. "Harry, you're being unreasonable. Family comes first." "I couldn't agree more, which is why I'm protecting my family from people who treat children like possessions to be shuffled around for adult convenience." He ended the call and finished making Tommy's lunch, already knowing that this was far from over. The Patterson family didn't accept defeat gracefully, and they had home field advantage in Richmond's social circles. The call came from Tommy's school at 2:47 p.m. "Mr. McCarty? This is Principal Roberts at Millbrook Elementary. I'm afraid there's been an incident involving Tommy." Harry was already reaching for his car keys. "What kind of incident?" "He's been injured." "Not seriously," she added quickly, "but we need you to come in immediately." The drive to Tommy's school felt like the longest 15 minutes of Harry's life. Every tactical scenario he'd ever trained for paled in comparison to the helpless terror of not knowing if his child was okay. Principal Roberts met him at the front office, her face grim. "Tommy's in the nurse's office. He's conscious and alert, but—" She hesitated. "Mr. McCarty, what I'm about to tell you is extremely concerning." Harry followed her down the hallway, his mind racing through possibilities. Playground accident? Bullying incident? What could have happened at school that required this level of administrative attention? Tommy sat on the nurse's cot, his left leg elevated and wrapped in an ice pack. His face was pale, streaked with dried tears, but he managed a weak smile when he saw his father. "Dad!" Harry was beside him in 3 steps, checking him over with the kind of systematic efficiency learned from battlefield medicine. "What hurts, buddy?" "My knee. It hurts really bad." The school nurse, a matronly woman named Mrs. Chun, approached with a clipboard and a deeply troubled expression. "Mr. McCarty, Tommy says he was injured off school property during lunch break. Normally, students aren't allowed to leave campus, but—" She glanced at Principal Roberts. "But what?" Harry's voice carried a dangerous edge. "His grandfather picked him up. Lester Patterson. He's on the approved pickup list." Harry felt ice form in his veins. Lester picked him up? When? Around noon. He said there was a family emergency and that you'd authorize the pickup. Tommy seemed to know him, so he followed protocol. What family emergency? Principal Roberts and Mrs. Chun exchanged glances. We assumed you would know. Harry knelt beside Tommy's cot, keeping his voice gentle despite the rage building in his chest. Tommy, can you tell me what happened? Where did Grandpa Lester take you? Tommy's lower lip trembled. He said you wanted him to pick me up. He said we were going to go see Mom and Krista, and that I needed to apologize for being mean to Krista last time. Apologize for what? For pushing her. But Dad, I didn't push her. She was saying mean things about you and Mom, and when I told her to stop, she pushed me first. But Grandpa Lester said I was lying. Harry's hands clenched into fists, but he kept his voice steady. What happened to your knee, son? Tommy's tears started fresh. We went to their house, and Krista was in the backyard. Grandpa Lester said I had to say sorry and that I had to mean it. But when I tried to explain what really happened, he got really mad. Mad how? He picked up a brick from the garden border. He said I needed to learn respect. And then Tommy's voice broke. He hit my knee with it, Dad. He said that's what happens to boys who lie and fight with their betters. The world went very quiet. Harry heard his own heartbeat, heard the hum of fluorescent lights, heard the distant sound of children playing at recess. But underneath it all, he heard something else, the sound of his own restraint beginning to crack. Did anyone else see this happen? Grandma Hilda was there. She was laughing. She said, Tommy's voice dropped to a whisper. She said, that's what useless things deserve. Harry closed his eyes, processing the information with military precision. Assault on a minor. Kidnapping, technically, since they'd taken Tommy under false pretenses. Psychological abuse. The Patterson family had just crossed a line they couldn't uncross. What else happened? Mom was there too. At the end, she came outside when I was crying, and Grandpa Lester told her I'd learned my lesson about respecting my elders. And Mom said, what did she say? Tommy looked up at his father with eyes that held too much pain for a 9-year-old. She said I was just a defect she forgot to flush. And then she told Grandpa Lester to bring me back to school because she didn't want to deal with me anymore. The silence in the nurse's office was deafening. Harry felt something fundamental shift inside him, like tectonic plates realigning after an earthquake. 20 years of military training had taught him to compartmentalize emotion, to think tactically even under extreme stress. But this wasn't war. This was his son. Mr. McCarty? Principal Roberts' voice seemed to come from very far away. Should we call the police? Harry looked at his son, bruised, frightened, but still trying to be brave for his father. No, not yet. Sir, if what Tommy is saying is true. It's true. Harry's voice was quiet, certain. But the police aren't equipped to handle this properly. He helped Tommy sit up carefully, noting how the boy favored his injured leg. Can you walk, buddy? I think so. Good. We're going home. Mr. McCarty, Mrs. Chun interjected. Tommy should see a doctor. There could be internal damage to the knee. We'll stop at the hospital on the way home. As they left the school, Tommy leaning on his father's arm, Harry was already making plans. The Patterson family thought they understood power. They had money, social connections, local influence. They thought they could brutalize a 9-year-old child and face no consequences. They were about to learn the difference between having power and knowing how to use it. Harry helped Tommy into the car, then sat for a moment in the parking lot, staring at his son's pale reflection in the rearview mirror. Dad, are you okay? Harry met his son's eyes in the mirror. I'm fine, Tommy. And I promise you something. No one will ever hurt you like that again. But what if they try? Harry started the engine, his voice carrying a certainty that seemed to calm his son's fears. They won't get the chance. Chapter 5. The Architect's Blueprint. The emergency room doctor confirmed what Harry already suspected. Tommy's knee was severely bruised, but not broken, though the impact had caused soft tissue damage that would require weeks of physical therapy. Harry sat in the waiting room while Tommy underwent x-rays, using the time to make a series of carefully planned phone calls. The first was to Felix Atkinson. Harry, I heard about what happened. Word travels fast in this town. How fast? Fast enough that Lester Patterson's already been making calls to his lawyer and a few city council members. He's claiming the boy fell off his bike. Harry felt a familiar cold calm settle over him, the same mental state that had made him effective in intelligence work. What kind of calls? The kind that suggest he knows he's stepped in deep shit and he's looking for political cover. He's got friends in the police department, Harry. This won't be a clean fight if you go through official channels. I wasn't planning to go through official channels. A pause. What do you need? Everything you can find on the Patterson family. Not just Lester and Hilda. I want to know about their business dealings, their finances, their secrets. Everyone has pressure points, Felix. I need to find theirs. Harry, I understand you're angry. This isn't anger. This is calculation. Felix's laugh was grim. In that case, I'll have a preliminary report by tomorrow morning. But Harry, whatever you're planning, be smart about it. Lester Patterson didn't build his construction empire by playing fair, and he's got more experience with dirty politics than you do. Maybe, but I have experience with a different kind of warfare. The second call was to Colonel Jessica Morrison, his former commanding officer in Army intelligence. Morrison had retired 2 years ago and now ran a private security firm that specialized in corporate investigations. More importantly, she owed Harry a favor from their time in Afghanistan. Harry McCarty, this is unexpected. How's civilian life treating you? It's complicated. I need a favor, Colonel. It's Jessica now, and favors come with details. Harry explained the situation in clinical terms, focusing on facts rather than emotions. Morrison listened without interruption, her silence growing more ominous as the story progressed. Jesus Christ, Harry, they did this to your kid. They did. What do you need? I need to know everything there is to know about Drew Davies and his connections to the Patterson family. Financial, personal, professional. I need to understand their relationship beyond what's obvious. You think there's more to this than just your wife's affair? I think coincidences are rare in my experience. Drew Davies appeared in my wife's life 6 months ago, right around the time she started distancing herself from Tommy. The Patterson family welcomed him like a long-lost son. Either Drew is the most charming salesman in Virginia, or there's something else connecting these people. I'll have my team run a deep background check. Should have something for you in 48 hours. The third call was the most difficult. Harry dialed his sister Sarah's number in Colorado, knowing that what he was about to ask would worry her. Harry, what a nice surprise. How are you and Tommy doing? We're managing. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to trust me without asking too many questions. His sister's voice immediately shifted to concern. What's wrong? I might need you to take Tommy for a few weeks. Maybe longer. There's a situation here that I need to handle, and I want him somewhere safe while I deal with it. Of course. You know I love having Tommy here. But Harry, what kind of situation? The kind that requires my full attention. I'll explain everything when I can, but right now I just need to know that you're willing to help. Always. You know that. But please be careful, whatever you're doing. I will. By the time Tommy was discharged from the hospital, Harry had the beginning of a plan. It would take time to gather all the intelligence he needed, but time was something he could afford. The Patterson family thought they'd sent a message about power and consequences. They were right about the message. They just misunderstood who was receiving it. That evening, Harry sat in his home office while Tommy slept upstairs, his injured leg elevated and wrapped in ice. The house felt different now. Not like a home under siege, but like a command center in preparation for war. He opened his laptop and began typing a detailed timeline of events, starting with Shelley's emotional withdrawal 18 months ago and ending with Tommy's assault that afternoon. Every conversation, every incident, every seemingly innocent comment that had served to isolate Tommy from his own family. The pattern was clear once he mapped it out. This hadn't been random cruelty. It had been systematic, deliberate. The Patterson family had been grooming Tommy for abandonment, conditioning him to accept that he was unwanted, unloved, disposable. The question was why? What did they gain from destroying a 9-year-old's self-worth? What was so important about Shelley's new relationship that they were willing to sacrifice their own grandson's emotional well-being? Harry's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This doesn't have to get complicated. Call me. L.P. Lester Patterson, making his opening move. Probably assuming that Harry would be intimidated by his connections, his money, his local influence. The old man had no idea who he was dealing with. Harry deleted the message without responding. In intelligence work, silence was often the most powerful response. Let them wonder what he was thinking, what he was planning. Let them make assumptions and mistakes while he gathered information and positioned his pieces. Tomorrow, Felix would begin providing detailed intelligence on the Patterson family's vulnerabilities. In 48 hours, Jessica Morrison's team would deliver a comprehensive analysis of Drew Davies' background. Within a week, Harry would understand exactly what he was up against and how to dismantle it. But tonight, he had a simpler task. He climbed the stairs to Tommy's room, where his son was lying awake despite the pain medication. "Dad, what's going to happen now?" Harry sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle Tommy's injured leg. "Now we get you better, and we make sure this never happens again. Will I have to see them again? Grandpa Lester and Grandma Hilda?" "Not unless you want to, and I don't think you'll want to." Tommy was quiet for a moment. "Dad, why do they hate me so much?" The question cut deeper than any physical wound could have. Harry chose his words carefully. "They don't hate you, Tommy. They're angry about adult things that have nothing to do with you, and they're taking that anger out on the wrong person. That's not your fault, and it's not something you can fix. But you can fix it." Harry met his son's eyes, seeing trust there that he didn't feel worthy of carrying. "Yes, I can fix it." How? By reminding them that some people fight back. Chapter 6. Gathering Storms. Felix Atkinson's report arrived at dawn, delivered by courier to Harry's front door along with his morning newspaper. 47 pages of financial records, property deeds, business partnerships, and personal history that painted a detailed portrait of the Patterson family empire. Harry read it over coffee while Tommy slept upstairs, his ankle still elevated and wrapped. The boy's physical injuries were healing, but the psychological damage would take longer to address. Every time Tommy woke up confused or frightened, Harry felt his resolve harden another degree. The Patterson Construction Company was more complex than its regional reputation suggested. Beyond the obvious commercial development projects, Lester Patterson had fingers in municipal contracting, low-income housing initiatives, and land speculation. More interesting were his partnerships, shell companies registered in Delaware, consulting agreements with out-of-state firms, and a web of financial relationships that suggested someone was working very hard to obscure the money trail. 3 names appeared repeatedly throughout the documentation. Roy Newton, a city planning commissioner who'd rubber-stamped several Patterson projects. Hal Bentley, a state environmental inspector whose reports had cleared questionable construction sites. And Drew Davies, whose pharmaceutical company had received consulting contract from Patterson Construction dating back 2 years. 2 years, long before Drew had entered Shelley's life. Harry set down his coffee cup and stared at that detail. In intelligence work, patterns were everything, and this pattern suggested premeditation on a scale he hadn't anticipated. Drew Davies hadn't randomly seduced his wife. He'd been cultivated as an asset by the Patterson family for reasons that went beyond simple romance. His phone rang at exactly 8 a.m. Harry let it ring 3 times before answering, already knowing who it would be. "Mr. McCarty, this is Ronald Hansen from Hansen, Keller and Associates. I represent the Patterson family. Congratulations. I'm calling to discuss a resolution to yesterday's unfortunate incident. My clients are prepared to make a generous offer to avoid any unnecessary legal complications." "What kind of offer?" "Full medical expenses for your son's injury, plus a substantial settlement to compensate for any pain and suffering. In exchange, you would agree to certain confidentiality provisions and acknowledge that the incident was accidental." Harry had interrogated enough liars to recognize the careful phrasing. "How substantial?" $50,000. Cash payment. No reporting requirements. $50,000 to pretend that Lester Patterson hadn't deliberately assaulted a 9-year-old child. It was insulting, but it was also revealing. The Patterson family was more worried about exposure than they were letting on. I'll need to think about it. Of course. But I should mention that this offer has a limited window. My clients prefer to resolve these matters quickly and quietly. I'll call you back. Harry ended the call and immediately dialed Felix Atkinson's number. They offered you money, Felix said without preamble. 50,000. How did you know? Because Lester Patterson's been making calls all morning, trying to line up character witnesses and alibis. He's scared, Harry. That's a lot of money for something he claims was an accident. What kind of alibis? The kind that suggest he's done this before. I talked to a source in family services. There have been 3 complaints about Lester Patterson's treatment of children over the past 5 years. All dismissed due to lack of evidence or witness credibility issues. Harry felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. What kind of complaints? Physical discipline that crossed the line. Always family members. Always children who couldn't or wouldn't testify effectively. The pattern suggests someone who knows exactly how far he can push without facing consequences. Until now. Harry, I've got more intelligence coming in, but I want to know something first. How far are you planning to take this? It was a fair question. In the military, rules of engagement were clearly defined. In civilian life, the boundaries were more fluid, more dependent on personal judgment. As far as necessary. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now. Harry hung up and checked on Tommy, who was awake and trying to get dressed for school despite his injured leg. I don't think you're ready for school yet, buddy, but I'll miss the math test. And we're supposed to start reading groups today. The determination in his son's voice was heartbreaking. Despite everything that had happened, Tommy was still trying to be a good student, still worried about disappointing his teachers. I'll call the school and explain. They'll work with us. Dad? The lawyer called, didn't he? Harry paused in the doorway. How did you know about the lawyer? I heard you talking. Are they trying to get in trouble for hurting me? The simple question demanded a complex answer. Harry sat on the edge of Tommy's bed, choosing his words carefully. They're trying to make the problem go away by giving us money. Sometimes adults do that when they've done something wrong and they don't want to face consequences. Are you going to take the money? What do you think I should do? Tommy considered this with the kind of seriousness that no 9-year-old should need to possess. I think if you take the money, then they'll think it's okay to hurt other kids. You're probably right. So you're not going to take it? No, I'm not going to take it. Tommy nodded, satisfied with this decision. Good. Money can't fix everything. Harry spent the rest of the morning making preparations. He called Tommy's school to arrange for temporary home instruction. He contacted a locksmith to upgrade the security on their house. He transferred a significant portion of his savings to an account at a different bank, one where the Patterson family's influence would be minimal. At noon, Jessica Morrison called from Colorado. Harry, I've got your background check on Drew Davies. You're not going to like what I found. Tell me, Davies isn't just some random pharmaceutical salesman. He's got connections to organized crime families in Philadelphia and Baltimore. Nothing prosecutable, but enough to suggest he's done work for people who don't advertise their services. What kind of work? Financial consulting. Money laundering, most likely. His company provides legitimate cover for moving dirty money through pharmaceutical supply chains. Harry felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. So, the Patterson family isn't just corrupt, they're working with organized crime. It gets worse. I found evidence of a shell company that connects Davies to at least 3 unsolved murders in the past 18 months. All business rivals of various construction companies. Jesus. Harry, you need to understand what you're dealing with here. This isn't just about your marriage or your son's assault. You've stumbled into something much bigger and much more dangerous. All the more reason to handle it properly. All the more reason to walk away. Take your son and disappear, Harry. These people don't just ruin lives, they end them. Harry looked through the kitchen window at Tommy's baseball glove, still lying forgotten on the patio table. His son deserved better than a life spent running from bullies, whether they were playground tormentors or organized crime figures. I appreciate the warning, Jessica, but I'm not walking away. Then be very, very careful. And Harry, if you need backup, you call me. Don't try to handle this alone. That evening, Harry called the Patterson family's lawyer and delivered his response to their settlement offer. "50,000 isn't enough," he said simply. "What would be enough?" Hanson asked, and Harry could hear the relief in the man's voice. "I'll let you know." Harry hung up before the lawyer could respond. Let them think he was negotiating in good faith. Let them believe that money could solve this problem. Meanwhile, he would continue gathering intelligence, building his case, and preparing for a conflict that would require every skill he'd learned in 20 years of warfare. The Patterson family had made a critical error in judgment. They'd assumed they were dealing with a grieving father who could be bought, intimidated, or discredited. They were about to learn that some enemies couldn't be purchased, and some wounds couldn't be healed with money. Chapter 7. The Art of War. 2 weeks after Tommy's assault, Harry received an unexpected visitor. Diana Patterson stood on his front porch at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Harry, we need to talk." He studied his former sister-in-law through the security system's camera before opening the door. Diana looked exhausted, her usually perfect makeup unable to hide the dark circles under her eyes. "About what?" "About Krista. About what she saw that day." Harry stepped aside to let her in, noting how she glanced nervously around the house, as if expecting surveillance equipment. She wasn't wrong. Felix Atkinson had helped him install a comprehensive security system that would record any conversation in the living room. "Tommy's upstairs doing physical therapy exercises," Harry said. "Keep your voice down." Diana nodded, perching on the edge of the sofa like a bird ready to take flight. "Harry, I know what Lester did was wrong. I know it was—" She struggled for words. "It was unforgivable. Then why are you here instead of calling the police?" "Because it's complicated. Because there are things you don't understand about our family, about the business, about—" She stopped, shaking her head. "God, I never thought it would come to this." Harry sat across from her, employing the patient silence he'd learned in interrogation training. Diana was cracking under pressure, and scared people often revealed more than they intended. "Krista won't stop talking about it," she finally continued. "She keeps asking why Grandpa Lester hurt Tommy, why Grandma Hilda laughed, why her Aunt Shelley said those terrible things. I don't know how to answer her. Try the truth." "The truth." Diana's laugh was bitter. "The truth is that this family destroys everything it touches. The truth is that I've been trapped in this nightmare for 3 years, ever since Brian died." "What do you mean, trapped?" Diana looked toward the stairs, as if checking to make sure Tommy couldn't hear. "When Brian was killed, I was supposed to inherit his share of the construction company. 40% ownership, worth about $12 million. Supposed to? There was a clause in the partnership agreement. If Brian died under questionable circumstances, his shares would revert to the surviving partners, pending investigation." Harry felt his tactical instincts sharpen. Brian's death wasn't an accident. The police said it was. Single car crash, no other vehicles involved. Brian had been drinking at a company party, lost control on a dark road. Diana's voice was hollow. But Brian didn't drink and drive. Ever. It was the one thing he was absolutely rigid about. "What did you do?" "What could I do?" "I had no proof, just suspicions. And Lester made it clear that if I caused problems, I'd lose everything. My home, Krista's inheritance, even visitation rights. He had lawyers, money, influence. I had a dead husband and a traumatized 8-year-old daughter." Harry processed this information with growing understanding. The Patterson family hadn't just enabled Tommy's abuse. They'd been running a criminal enterprise for years, eliminating threats and silencing witnesses through intimidation and violence. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Drew Davies was at that company party. Because he was the one who suggested Brian have just one drink to celebrate a successful project. Because 3 days after Brian died, Drew was hired as a consulting advisor to Patterson Construction. The pattern was becoming clear. Drew Davies wasn't just Shelley's affair partner. He was an enforcer, someone brought in to handle problems that required permanent solutions. And now he's positioning himself to take Brian's place in the family business," Harry said. "More than that, he's positioning himself to take everything. Lester's getting old, Harry. He's been grooming Drew to take over operations, with Shelley as his partner. Once they're married, once she has legal claim to Patterson assets, They won't need you or Krista anymore. Diana nodded, tears finally spilling over. That's why Lester was so brutal with Tommy. He's sending a message. Anyone who threatens the new power structure will be dealt with. Your son was just the most convenient target. Harry stood and walked to the window, his mind racing through tactical possibilities. The situation was more complex than he'd realized, but complexity created opportunities for someone who understood how to exploit them. What do you want from me, Diana? Help. Protection. I have evidence. Documents that Brian hid before he died, recordings of conversations, financial records that prove the company's been used for money laundering. But I can't use them alone. They'll kill me before I ever reach a courtroom. Why should I trust you? You've been part of this family for 3 years. You watched them isolate and abuse my son. Because I hate myself for it every day. Because I've been so scared of losing Krista that I let them turn me into someone I don't recognize. Because she looked up at him with desperate honesty. Because you're the first person who's ever stood up to them. And I think you might actually be able to stop them. Harry returned to his chair, studying Diana's face for signs of deception. Her fear was genuine, but fear could be manufactured. Her regret seemed real, but regret was easy to fake when circumstances demanded it. If I help you, I want everything. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence Brian collected. And I want Krista's complete testimony about what she witnessed that day with Tommy. She's just a child. She's a witness. And she's in as much danger as the rest of us if we don't handle this properly. Diana was quiet for a long moment. If I do this, if I give you everything, there's no going back. They'll know I betrayed them. There's already no going back. The only question is whether you face them as an enemy with powerful allies, or as a victim with no protection. And Tommy? What happens to him? Harry's voice was cold, certain. Tommy will be safe. That's not negotiable. Okay. Diana stood, her decision made. Okay, I'll get you the evidence. But Harry, when this is over, when they're all in prison or dead or whatever you're planning, promise me that Krista will be safe. Promise me she won't pay for her family's crimes. Krista will be fine. She's innocent in this. And Shelley? Harry's expression didn't change. Shelley made her choices. She'll live with the consequences. After Diana left, Harry called Felix Atkinson with an update. The new intelligence changed everything. This wasn't just about revenge for Tommy's assault. This was about bringing down a criminal organization that had been operating with impunity for years. How reliable is Diana Patterson? Felix asked, scared enough to be honest. And she's got evidence that could put the whole family away. What about Drew Davies? If he's as connected as Jessica thinks, taking him down won't be simple. Then we don't take him down simply. We get creative. Harry spent the rest of the day planning. By evening, he had the framework of an operation that would systematically dismantle everything the Patterson family had built, piece by piece, ally by ally, until they were left with nothing but the justice they'd spent years avoiding. Tommy's assault had been the opening move in what the Patterson family thought was a game of intimidation. They were about to learn that Harry McCarty didn't play games. He ended them. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. The evidence Diana Patterson delivered was more comprehensive than Harry had dared hope. 47 pages of financial documents, 12 hours of audio recordings, and a detailed journal that Brian Patterson had been keeping for the 2 years before his death. Reading through it felt like watching a crime family slowly reveal its true nature. Harry spread the documents across his dining room table while Tommy slept upstairs, his injured leg finally healing enough to walk without favoring it. The boy's physical recovery was progressing well, but Harry had noticed him checking the locks on doors and windows before bedtime. Some wounds took longer to heal than others. The journal entries painted a picture of systematic corruption that went back decades. Lester Patterson had been skimming from municipal contracts, laundering money through shell companies, and eliminating business rivals through a network of professional criminals. Drew Davies wasn't just another hired gun. He was the architect of a sophisticated operation that had murdered at least 6 people over the past 3 years. But the most damning evidence was recorded conversations between Lester, Hilda, and Drew discussing Shelley's recruitment to their operation. They targeted her specifically because of Harry's military background and security expertise, seeing his knowledge as a potential asset to their organization. When Harry proved unwilling to be corrupted, they decided to eliminate him from the equation through divorce and isolation. Tommy's assault hadn't been spontaneous cruelty. It had been a calculated psychological attack designed to break Harry's resistance and force him to accept their terms. Harry was studying the financial records when his secure phone rang. Felix Atkinson's voice was tense. "Harry, we've got a problem. Diana Patterson and her daughter are missing." "Missing how?" "They didn't come home last night. Neighbors say they saw Diana packing a suitcase around noon yesterday, acting nervous. Car's gone. Cell phone going straight to voicemail." Harry felt ice form in his veins. Did they run, or were they taken? Unknown. But I intercepted police chatter about a car matching Diana's license plate being found abandoned near the airport. No sign of occupants. Harry was already moving, gathering the evidence from his dining room table and securing it in his safe. If the Patterson family had discovered Diana's betrayal, they'd be coming for him next. "Felix, I need you to implement the contingency plan we discussed. Get Tommy somewhere safe, and make sure you have copies of all this evidence." "What about you?" "I'm going to end this tonight." Harry called his sister in Colorado, waking her despite the late hour. "Sarah, I need you to come get Tommy. Tonight. Drive straight through. Don't stop except for gas." "Harry, what's happening?" "Everything I was afraid might happen. Tommy's in danger, and I need him somewhere they can't reach him. I'll leave in 20 minutes. "Sarah, if something happens to me, if you don't hear from me in the next 48 hours, you take that evidence package I sent you and give it to the FBI field office in Denver. All of it. Harry, promise me." "I promise." Harry woke Tommy gently, explaining that they were going on an unexpected trip to visit Aunt Sarah. The boy was sleepy and compliant, not questioning why they needed to pack in the middle of the night or why his father seemed so tense. They met Sarah at a rest stop 50 miles outside Richmond, transferring Tommy and his belongings to her car, while Harry watched the surrounding area for surveillance. His sister didn't ask questions, understanding that some conversations could wait until everyone was safe. "Be good for Aunt Sarah," Harry told his son. "I'll call you in a few days." "When are you coming to Colorado, Dad?" "Soon. I just have some business to finish here first." As he watched Sarah's taillights disappear into the darkness, Harry felt the last of his restraints fall away. Tommy was safe. The evidence was secure. Diana and Krista were either dead or beyond his ability to help them. It was time to remind the Patterson family what happened when they declared war on the wrong person. Harry's first stop was Drew Davies' condo, a luxury unit in Richmond's financial district that he'd purchased under a shell company name. Harry had been watching the building for 2 weeks, learning the patterns of security guards and identifying weaknesses in their surveillance system. The lock on Davies' door was expensive, but not military grade. Harry was inside in under 90 seconds, moving through the darkness with practiced silence. Davies was asleep in the master bedroom, alone and vulnerable. Harry stood over the bed for a moment, studying the man who had orchestrated his son's psychological torture. Davies looked smaller in sleep, less formidable than he'd seemed during those staged fundraiser meetings with Shelley. The chloroform was quick and efficient. Davies never woke up. When Drew Davies regained consciousness, he was zip-tied to a chair in an abandoned warehouse outside the city limits. Harry sat across from him, his face impassive in the harsh light of a single work lamp. "Where are Diana and Krista Patterson?" Davies tested his restraints, his salesman's confidence already cracking. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Wrong answer." Harry showed him a photograph from Brian Patterson's surveillance. Davies meeting with known criminals in a Philadelphia parking garage. "We can do this easy or hard, Drew, but we're going to do it." For the next hour, Harry employed interrogation techniques he'd learned in Afghanistan. Davies was soft, civilian soft, and his resistance crumbled quickly under professional pressure. By the time Harry was finished, he had locations, names, bank account numbers, and a complete confession detailing 3 years of criminal activity. Most importantly, he learned that Diana and Krista were alive, being held at a Patterson construction warehouse, pending disposal in the morning. "You have a choice," Harry told Davies as he prepared to leave. "You can wait here for the police to find you and tell them everything you just told me. Or you can try to escape these restraints and warn your partners." "What happens if I warn them?" Harry's smile was cold, predatory. "Then I stop being patient." He left Davies alive, but immobilized, with a cell phone just out of reach and a timer counting down to when the anonymous tip would reach the FBI. The Patterson construction warehouse was a fortress of concrete and steel, surrounded by security, fencing, and cameras. But Harry had been studying the building for weeks, and fortresses were only as strong as the people defending them. He entered through a storm drain that connected to the building's foundation, emerging inside the loading dock area where two armed guards were playing cards and drinking coffee. They never heard him coming. Diana and Krista were being held in a second-floor office, zip-tied but unharmed. Krista was sleeping against her mother's shoulder while Diana stayed awake, her eyes wide with terror. "We're leaving," Harry whispered, cutting their restraints. "How did you find us?" Drew Davies is very talkative when properly motivated. They made it to the loading dock before the remaining guards discovered their missing colleagues. Harry moved Diana and Krista behind a concrete barrier as gunfire erupted around them. "Can you drive?" he asked Diana. "Yes. Keys are in the black SUV by the gate. Take Krista and go to the address I'm going to give you. FBI agents will be waiting. What about you?" "I have one more stop to make." The Patterson estate looked peaceful in the pre-dawn darkness, its manicured lawns and elegant architecture suggesting old money and older respectability. Harry disabled the security system with equipment Felix had provided, then entered through the same window he'd used during his reconnaissance visits. Lester and Hilda Patterson were asleep in their master bedroom, defenseless and unaware that their world was about to end. Harry stood over them for a moment, remembering his son's tears, Diana's terror, Brian Patterson's mysterious death. When they woke up, zip-tied to chairs in their own living room, Harry was sitting across from them with a laptop displaying financial records and recorded conversations. "This is how it's going to work," he said calmly. "You're going to confess to everything. The murders, the money laundering, the assault on my son. All of it." "You're insane," Lester snarled. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" "Yes. I'm dealing with criminals who made the mistake of targeting my family." "You have no proof." Harry played a recorded conversation where Lester and Drew discussed dealing with the McCarty problem permanently. "I have all the proof I need. The question is whether you want to spend the rest of your lives in prison or the rest of your lives in graves." Hilda spoke for the first time, her voice shaking. "What do you want?" "Justice. For Tommy, for Brian, for Diana and Krista. For everyone you've hurt over the years. And if we refuse?" Harry's expression didn't change. "Then your remains will be discovered in about 6 months, along with evidence suggesting you were killed by rival crime families. Drew Davies will be found to have committed suicide in his cell after confessing to multiple murders. And I'll disappear with my son to start a new life somewhere far from here." The silence stretched for several minutes. Finally, Lester Patterson's shoulders sagged in defeat. "What kind of deal are you offering?" "Life in prison instead of death. It's the only deal you're getting." By the time the FBI arrived, summoned by anonymous tips that led them to 3 separate crime scenes, the Patterson family's criminal empire had collapsed completely. Drew Davies had confessed to multiple murders. Lester and Hilda Patterson had signed detailed admissions of guilt. Diana Patterson was cooperating fully with federal investigators. And Harry McCarty had vanished as quietly as he'd begun his campaign of justice. Chapter 9. New Foundations. 6 months later, Harry stood in the front yard of a small ranch house in Montana, watching Tommy practice his swing with a new baseball bat. The boy's knee had healed completely, and his confidence was returning day by day. More importantly, he was sleeping through the night again, no longer checking locks or jumping at unexpected sounds. "Dad, watch this," Tommy called out, connecting solidly with the ball and sending it sailing across their new backyard. "Great swing, buddy. You're getting stronger every day." The news for Virginia had been everything Harry had hoped for. Lester Patterson had been sentenced to life in prison without parole. Hilda Patterson had received 25 years. Drew Davies had been found dead in his holding cell, officially a suicide, but more likely the result of organized crime figures eliminating a potential witness. Shelley had been arrested as an accessory to multiple crimes, though her lawyers were negotiating a plea deal that would probably result in supervised probation and community service. Harry felt no satisfaction in her downfall, only relief that she could no longer harm their son. Diana and Krista Patterson had entered witness protection after Diana's testimony helped convict 17 additional members of the criminal organization. Krista was reportedly doing well in therapy, learning to process the trauma she'd witnessed and experienced. Mr. McCarty? Harry turned to see a woman approaching from the street. She was young, professional-looking, with the kind of alertness that suggested law enforcement training. "I'm Agent Andrea Hodges, FBI. I was hoping we could talk." Harry glanced at Tommy, who was absorbed in his practice routine. "About what?" "About a job offer. The Bureau is interested in your particular skill set. I'm retired from that kind of work." "Are you?" "Because what happened in Virginia suggests otherwise. That was some of the most precise intelligence work we've seen outside of federal operations." Harry studied the agent's face, looking for deception or ulterior motives. She seemed genuine, but Harry had learned to trust his instincts over appearances. "I have a son to raise." "We know, and we're prepared to offer a position that would allow you to work primarily from home, consulting on cases that require your specific expertise. Good pay, full benefits, and the satisfaction of bringing down people who hurt children." The offer was tempting, but Harry had made promises to himself and to Tommy about the kind of life they would build together. "I'll think about it." Agent Hodges handed him a business card. "Take your time." "But Mr. McCarty, what you did in Virginia, a lot of children are safer because of it. There are more situations like that out there, more families who need someone with your skills to fight for them." After she left, Harry found Tommy sitting on their front porch, his baseball glove in his lap. "Was that a police officer, Dad?" "FBI agent. She wanted to offer me a job. Are you going to take it?" Harry sat beside his son, considering how to answer. "I don't know yet. It would mean helping other kids who are in trouble, like you were. But it would also mean sometimes having to travel for work." Tommy was quiet for a moment, displaying the kind of thoughtful consideration that had become his trademark since their move to Montana. "Would it help kids like Krista too?" "Yes. Kids like Krista and Diana, and anyone else who's being hurt by people who think they're too powerful to face consequences." "Then I think you should take it. But only if you promise you'll always come home." Harry put his arm around his son's shoulders, feeling the solid warmth of the boy who had given him purpose when everything else had fallen apart. "I promise I'll always come home." That evening, after Tommy was asleep, Harry sat on his back porch looking up at the Montana sky. The stars were clearer here than they'd ever been in Virginia, unspoiled by the light pollution of cities and the moral pollution of families who protected criminals. He thought about Shelley, probably serving her community service and wondering how her carefully planned future had collapsed so completely. He thought about Lester Patterson, spending his final years in a federal prison, finally facing consequences for decades of cruelty. He thought about Diana and Krista, learning to build new lives free from the fear that had defined their existence. But mostly, he thought about Tommy, sleeping peacefully in his new bedroom, surrounded by trophies from his Little League team and books about baseball heroes. The boy who had survived his family's betrayal and emerged stronger, kinder, more resilient than anyone had a right to expect. Harry pulled out Agent Hodges' business card and his cell phone. There were more children out there who needed protection, more families who deserved justice, more criminals who thought their power made them untouchable. He'd learned in the military that some battles were worth fighting regardless of the personal cost. His war with the Patterson family was over, but the larger war, the one against people who hurt children and destroy families, that war would never end. Harry dialed the number on the card. "Agent Hodges? This is Harry McCarty. I'd like to discuss that job offer." As he talked, planning his return to the kind of work he'd been born to do, Harry felt something he hadn't experienced in years: complete certainty about his purpose. He would build a new life with Tommy, but he would also use his skills to ensure that other children didn't have to endure what his son had survived. The Patterson family had taught him an important lesson. Some people only understood consequences when those consequences were delivered with overwhelming force. Harry McCarty had become very good at delivering consequences, and there were a lot of people in this world who had them coming. 3 years later, Tommy McCarty would tell his high school guidance counselor that his father was the strongest person I know, not because he never gets scared, but because he does what's right even when it's scary. By then, Harry had helped the FBI bring down 4 major criminal organizations and rescued dozens of children from abusive situations. Shelley McCarty would serve 18 months of supervised probation and was required to undergo psychological counseling. She never attempted to contact her son. Lester Patterson died in federal prison 2 years into his sentence. Hilda Patterson remained incarcerated, showing no remorse for her crimes. Diana and Krista Patterson thrived in witness protection, with Krista eventually becoming a social worker specializing in trauma counseling for children. And in a small house in Montana, a father and son build a life based on trust, respect, and the understanding that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by the choice to protect and cherish the people who matter most. Some stories end with revenge. The best ones end with redemption. This was one of the best ones. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.